I have my first 5-star read of 2023 this week. Let's get to it. Hi everyone, I'm Sandy and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a 1001 book countdown for you. If you're not familiar with the 1001 book countdown, I will leave a card up here for you where you can go and check out the original video. But basically I'm reading books off of the 1001 books you must read before you die list as a passion project of mine. I picked it up a number of years ago, combined all the editions together, which was actually 1,300 books, and have been reading from it ever since. This was well before I knew BookTube was a thing, and I was looking for a way to find new things to read. And so I am such a list person. This spoke to me. I don't love the title of the book. I don't feel like anyone should dictate to you what you should be reading or what you have to read before you die. But this is something that was important to me as a passion project. So when I started my BookTube channel, I decided to start counting it down from 1001, even though I had already read 300 or so books at the time. But hopefully you consider giving me a subscribe and sticking around and seeing how far I make it on this massive project of mine. I'm having a lot of fun still, so I hope you consider sticking around and watching how long it takes me to make it through this. At my current pace, it's a while. So I'm trying really hard not to worry about that. But for today, what we will go ahead and do is put up the numbers, which are 893, which is my grand total of what I have left, and 52. And that second number represents the number of books that I have left to read in 2023. Every year at the beginning of the year, I pre-select 52 books, and I track those separately because I like to see the number approach zero or get to zero, though I have yet to make it to zero since I started my channel. But that is what that second number represents. This is actually my second countdown of the year, and it's still at 52 because the first countdown of the year didn't change any reads from 2023. They were late ads for different events. It's a thing. All right. So what did I actually read? Let's start with the first book. The first book is Flannery O'Connor. This is the complete stories, but what I read is actually Everything That Rises Must Converge as a group of 9 collected short stories. I read this for the Flannery O January event, and I'll leave all of those hosts linked in the description below. This is my second Flannery O'Connor that I have read in January for that particular event. As I said, this is a collection of 9 short stories, and I read this, I think, in the second week of January. And I don't remember what all of the short stories were about now. I don't know why Flannery O'Connor is not speaking to me in the way I want her to. I want to love the writing. I will say I like these short stories considerably more than Wise Blood, which was the first book that I read, but it just didn't stick with me. Like, why am I not remembering? The one thing I do recall about these is that there was a lot of death, and just kind of like it felt like in almost every story in this had to do with someone dying. It's like, okay. But like I said, I did enjoy the short stories quite a bit more. I do have at least one more book. The Violent Buried Away of Flannery O'Connor's to read for the 1001 book countdown. But yeah, this one, I kind of put it in the middle of the road again, and the details did not stay with me, which is unfortunate. But I get to change the numbers though with this one, because with this I go from 893 to 892, and thankfully it was on my 2023 list. So with that I get to go 52 to 51. Finally, yay, one book. All right, so I do have other books for you though, because that one was not my 5-star read. Okay, the next book that I have is Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquirrel. I'm not sure if that's how you say her last name or not. This particular book was published in, I have to look in the back, in 1992 in Mexico and 1995 in the US. And she actually had 11 books that she has written. I have only been familiar with this one, very familiar with this cover. And this book actually follows a young girl whose name is Tita. And Tita has a very trying and difficult life for a lot of reasons in this book. And I don't want to go through a huge amount of the details, but she has some very big life events very early in the book that shape the rest of the book. I don't want to do spoilers for it. So The one thing that is really unique about this book that I loved a lot was the use of food. It's broken into 12 months, January through December, and each month has a different food representing the things that are going on in that particular month. Now, the story isn't told over 12 months. It's not that it's linear like that. It's told over a much longer period of time. But each month in there has some amazing description of food, how you prepare it, things that just sound so good in a lot of ways. Weirdly, July is oxtail soup, and that same day I was picking up to read July, happened to be talking to our nephew who was making oxtail soup for his mother and father. I was like, I had no idea that this is something that we could make. I've never even tried to make it. I don't know. It was just interesting to me that there was that direct relationship back to the book. So I did end up enjoying this book for the most part, but there were some big issues with it. It really in how women were portrayed in this, and some of the events that happened were very brutal, but very short. And some things that would be extremely significant to, some of the characters in the book were virtually just glossed over very, very quickly. And that was really tough. I had a hard time with some of those pieces. I also had a hard time in the end figuring out the timeline, like what exactly was happening with it. That kind of a piece. I did end up giving it right at the 3-star, kind of 2.5, 3-star mark. Oh, I did this as a buddy read with Britta Bowler too. I'm losing my mind today. I'm so sorry. I did this as a buddy read with Britta Bowler, and we had a great conversation. We read it over a very short amount of time, over just a few days. It's not a huge book, and it was very easy to read. But the overall, that rating that I had given it, it was okay. There were some real problems with it, some real triggering stuff in it as well. And I didn't necessarily like many of the main characters, which was a real problem. So I don't know. I think that I can see why it's so, well known as a piece of literature. It just wasn't one that I was like, wow, that's the best book ever. I don't know. I'm not sure why, but I did finish it. I just finished it yesterday, actually. And so with this book, we get to go from 892 to 891. And it was thankfully on my 52 list for 2023. So that number gets to go from 51 to 50. I feel better already. But my last book, my 5-star read. I struggled with giving it 5 stars, I will say that. But in the end, sometimes I think I'm too stingy with 5 stars. So I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to go with it as a 5-star read for me. And the book, it is Middlemarch by George Eliot. This book, it was originally published in It was originally published in 1871 to 1872 as 8 installments. And this book is broken into 8 books. So you can see very much the delineation between those different pieces. Editing Sandy, I forgot to say that this book was actually the pick for January for the Up to No Good Book Club, which has Shelley Swearingen and Fraser Simon and Jolene at Bookworm Adventure Girl, as well as Deb, Sonia, and Angela, who are subscribers and friends. I'm so sorry. I completely forgot to mention that our check-in's actually not until February 4th for this particular book. So, yeah. George Eliot has 7 main novels, many of which are on my 1001 book countdown. This is actually my 3rd George Eliot book that I have read. I've read Silas Marner and I've read Adam Bede. Adam Bede being the debut novel. This one is close to the end, second to the last, I believe, is what I had read. And this follows a wide cast of characters in this town called Middlemarch. And Middlemarch is gloriously dysfunctional and very soap opera-like, with everything, with all of the residents in there and lots of gossipy people and everybody's business and wanting to understand who's doing what to whom and having judgments on what was occurring and who was marrying who or who wasn't allowed to marry who. And it was fascinating. I was enthralled once I finally picked it up and really started to dig into it. It took me a minute to get into it, which is kind of where that, does it deserve 5 stars for me? like I said, I'm just going to give it the 5 stars because I had so much fun, like keeping up with the characters. I think the numerous number of characters was part of what I struggled with. But once I figured out who they were, it was so much fun to read. It was like, I have to finish this today because I want to find out what happens to all of the main characters. There's a character whose name is Dorothea. There's her sister Celia. There is a doctor named Lydgate. There is, just a wide variety of different ones. And so they all kind of intersect and interrelate in different ways, but they don't fully come together. Really, all of them don't fully come together really ever in the book. And so part of that, when I had done a little bit more research in Middlemarch, was that this work was actually one that was compiled of 2 other works, and I could kind of see that at times. Like there was a very strong storyline over here with one group of characters, a very strong storyline over here with another group of characters, and they really didn't kind of converge until the end. And so it was interesting to read because I kept waiting for that, kept waiting for it. And, you know, George Eliot sometimes likes to throw in surprising pieces. Certainly in Adam Bede, that was the case. So I was waiting for that. I was waiting for something big, some big reveal, some big thing that would happen. I'm not even going to begin to try and say if that exists in this book or not. It is 800 and something pages, this version that I have here. So it is an effort to get through. I wouldn't say start with Middlemarch if you've never read George Eliot. If you want a short George Eliot, read Silas Marner. You know, it is good. It's not as good as like Adam Bede was for me or this one was for me, but it is good and gives you an idea of the writing style. Adam Bede is tricky because there's a lot of slang in it. This also has some slang in it, and so, or accented writing in it, so it can be very difficult to understand at times. But Middlemarch ends up being my first 5-star of the year. Is George Eliot becoming a favorite writer now? Maybe. It's very possible. I have enjoyed all 3 books that I've read. I do own The Mill on the Floss. I own Daniel Deronda. Are both 2 that I really want to read as well. But Middlemarch, thank you, Middlemarch. You made my day, made my month, and gave me my first 5-star read of the year. I really had a good time reading this particular book. I really appreciated the end because the end kind of gives you a finale that wraps everything up for you and gives you an idea of what happened to all of the characters, not all of the characters, but to some of the characters. So, but Middlemarch by George Eliot. With this book, we get to go from 891 to 890, almost out of the 890s. And it was on my 52 list for 2023. So we get to go from 50 to 49. 49, I'm in the 40s. Yay! I'm so happy to be in the 40s. I redeemed from the last countdown by reading books that were on my 2023 list. I'm so thrilled. I only have 1 book left in January. It is currently the 27th, and the book that I have left to read, I have not started, is La Reine Margot by Alexander Dumas. This is the last book. I have 4 days. I have 4 days to finish it, and then for the first time ever, I will have finished every book I had put on my TBR for the 1001 book countdown in a month. No, that's not true. That's not true. This is the last book that I have on my TBR for January. So I really do want to read this, and I love Alexander Dumas. It's just, I'm just finished Middlemarch. I feel like I finished kind of big, heavy books, and part of me just wants to go read something fun and something not heavy going into February. You know, I have a Fine Balance coming up. I have Perigorio coming up, and so yeah, part of me is just like, should you read this right now, or should I just kind of table it and pick something that's shorter? I don't know. We'll see what happens this week. Jury's still out with this one, but this is the last book I have on my TBR for January to finish. But La Reine Margot by Alexander Dumas. It was a good week. It was a good couple weeks. So I'm doing these videos about every couple weeks if I have a couple of books. I don't usually like doing one video per book. So yeah, you'll see these kind of sporadically scheduled as the months come up, depending on how many books I actually make it through. Other than that, I have no other books in progress right now. None. Zero. Zilch. I have not a single book started. Very unusual for me as well. I'm kind of like, well, what should I read since I've read so much off of my January TBR? I don't actually know. Yep, that's my update. It's very unusual, but I'm thrilled with where I got 3 books off of the 2023 list. Only one more to make my goal. It was a good reading month, or good. It's been a great reading month and a 5-star read. Thrilled, absolutely thrilled. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time.